Welcome, everyone, from the campus of Notre Dame. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. It's a beautiful fall day on campus. It's in the low 70s. Students are busy with midterms. They're going to be leaving for fall break in a couple of weeks. So there's an intensity to campus right now as students are preparing for their exams and other projects. At the same time, our hearts are heavy, and we join with Father John in prayer for all of the victims and all those who are trying to put things back together in Puerto Rico, in Cuba, all over the state of Florida and South Carolina in response to Hurricane Ian. So our prayers and solidarity go out to all of those, especially alumni, parents, and friends that are struggling with the basic elements to get things back together. But today I am particularly thrilled to be able to share with you somebody who is a dear friend of the university, but also somebody that I consider a person that I love, admire deeply, and I'm really, really grateful to have in my life and in our collective lives here at Notre Dame. His name is Dick Ebersol, and he is a legend in the world of sports and entertainment and all things that have to do with television and production. You're going to hear a lot more about that. He has recently come out with a book that I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed reading the last couple of days. A person that I've gotten to know very well over the last 10 years, but now know even better. And it's a gripping, fascinating read from Saturday night to Sunday night. My wife, Carmen, who I don't think has watched one of these interviews since they began at the start of COVID in 3 years, I think she's tuned in today just because she loves Dick so much and wants to hear him. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dick Ebersol. Thanks, Dick, for making the time to be with us today.
My pleasure, Lou. Thank you.
So you began as a public school kid in Connecticut, and you've gone on to lead this absolutely amazing life. Again, you've got to read the book to get the full scope of the experiences and the influences that you've had on so much of our lives and our culture. But you grew up as this kid in a public school in Connecticut, and then it was at your father's urging that he convinced you to do something your senior year that really expanded your horizons. Can you start out and tell us a little bit about that decision?
I've been fortunate enough to have been selected as a student to go overseas, a full scholarship to live with a French family, part of American Field Service, something that was started back at the time following World War I and World War II. And when I found out about it, I went home that afternoon, waited for my father to come home for dinner, and trying to summon up the courage to tell him I didn't want to go, because I wanted to be on the varsity basketball team that was pegged to win the small town state championship. Litchfield was a very small town. And he beautifully, softly, as all country lawyers do usually, persuaded me that it was the thing to do, that I should go. And I did go to France. I lived with this wonderful, glorious French family. He was the town doctor. And very quickly, I got caught up in town activities to the extent I played on the town basketball team, injured myself, ended up in a hospital in Paris while they worked on my knee. And it was during that period of time that I just became fascinated with writing to friends who would keep me up to date on what was happening on the TV show Wide World of Sports, which had started only a month or two before I went overseas. And this was the first show of its type on American television, where they took you to different parts of the world every week and you got to watch their championship sports events. And I thought it was a great show.
Mm-hmm.
It was completely absorbing with the stories that it told about those regions of the country and the people who lived in them. And I just wanted to be part of it. And some months later, still living with that French family, they decided to go to the 24-hour of Le Mans car race. And we went, while my family went to watch the race, they trusted me, and I went looking for the wide world of sports people and got hired, Lou, as they say, as a gopher. Go for coffee, go for ice cream, go for cigarettes for them. And one thing led to another. And when I was done, they thought I was a glorious gopher, I guess. And they encouraged me to contact their offices in New York when I got back in the States. And I became a gopher throughout the college football season, traveling across the country to do things on various college football telecasts. I think the first time I ever saw a Notre Dame game up close was that way. I was there to run coffee and in some cases, cigarettes to the announcers. And my career took off from there.
Yeah.
And I dropped out of Yale at the height of the war in Vietnam to really pursue it as a career. My parents were away at the time. They probably would have tied me up and kept me home if they thought I was going to do that. But by the time they caught up with me a month or two later in the Rocky Mountains where they were, and I was doing an event. And that was the beginning of my sports television career.
Which is an extraordinary story because you come back, as you mentioned, you go to Yale, and then you're compelled to drop out of Yale to become the very first researcher for the Olympic Games. You become this global citizen very quickly from growing up in this kind of country town in Litchfield. And it's an amazing progression how fast things happen. And you get mentored by Roone Arledge.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about that formation and what you learned early on about the importance of storytelling in sport.
Well, with both Arledge and Jim McKay, his star talent, everything was giving the audience at home a chance to get to know these athletes. These were not athletes who played Major League Baseball or NBA basketball. These were guys who lived in these various towns along the way. And we had to bring them to life by knowing their life stories, whether their dad had died in the war, whether their mother had taken in laundry from the Nazis, whatever it was my job to ferret out those stories of those families, put them together in a presentable manner, not too overwritten, so that a Jim McKay could just glance down, get a couple of notes, and then begin to paint a word picture of those people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning of me as a young storyteller and producer.
Mm-hmm. And then Dick, there's this really sudden departure from your passion in sports. You're recruited to leave ABC and go, after you complete your degree at Yale, while you're still working, you go over to NBC because Johnny Carson is no longer going to allow NBC to run reruns of his show on Saturday nights. So they're looking to create a Saturday night, late night show. And you start up Saturday Night Live, and you find Lorne Michaels along the way to become the artistic director. And the two of you forge this, and you begin with an initial cast that still to this day is extraordinary. Gilda Radner, John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, and the like. But then years later, the program starts to kind of stumble, and Lorne leaves the show, and you're asked to come back and rescue the show in many ways. And you find, again, Eddie Murphy, Billy Crystal, Martin Short, and other stars like that. Anything from these years, these two stints at Saturday Night Live, from its founding and then to its resurgence, any memorable stories that you'd like to share, or any favorite characters along the line?
Well, the most important people involved in the show were there by the time I got back there the second time. But the first week's show that I was to produce didn't have a host yet. And I insisted that that host be an actress who I kind of had watched on TV, roughly my age, wildly attractive. Her name was Susan St. James, and she was pushing a movie called Carbon Copy at the time. And she came to New York to host the show. By the end of that week, rehearsing and getting the show ready and the show airing, she arrived. And when it came time for her to go home after about 6 days or nights, I knew that she was going to be part of my life forever. She would be indeed the love of my life. And we were married within 2-3 weeks. And she moved back east, brought her kids. She had kids some years before they came. And we started a family with a couple more that we had together. And we've been married, as I say, more than 40 years, living in small.
That's amazing. You met and you're married 48 days later. Many would not think that this was going to be a marriage to last 41 years later, and she is, Susan St. James has been a longstanding leader on our Performing Arts Advisory Council. The both of you are Notre Dame parents of Charlie, class of 2005. And through the partnership with Notre Dame football and NBC, you become intricate leaders and partners in this family. But she had to be your best co-host ever, right, on Saturday Night Live?
She's the best co-host I've ever had and will ever have. And I'm never going to let her go.
So she makes also a pretty radical decision in her life. As a television and movie star, Macmillan and Wife, and Kate and Allie, she decides as your career takes off to become a full-time mother, to raise the 5 kids as you're able to travel. It seems like the success that you've enjoyed is only because of the partnership that you've had with Susan over the years.
Couldn't agree with you more, Lou. I mean, I would not have been able to have this incredible career, which involves a prodigious, well, now I'm retired, but it involved a prodigious amount of travel. And Susan managed the nest and raised our boys and daughter to a fairly well. And we have been able to pull off the impossible, to have a high-level career.
Yeah.
She ultimately went back to work and did Kate and Allie for 4 or 5 years with Jane Curtin. And I was in New York doing Saturday Night Live and ultimately other shows. And that's a pretty rare thing, but all of that was due to her incredible, steadfast hand, a loving hand over the family and raising these great kids.
Yeah. Well, one of the stories that you point to in the book is you have Eddie Murphy comes back and he's critical in the resurgence of Saturday Night Live. I mean, you feature him nonstop and he has all these great characters and stories and one of which is, a satire on Mr. Rogers as he plays the role of Mr. Robinson's neighborhood. And my understanding is that one time you had an unannounced visitor, Mr. Rogers himself. Tell us a little bit about that.
Fred Rogers arrived unannounced downstairs in the lobby at 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York and was ushered up to the Saturday Night Live offices to meet with me. Came up, he was as charming as you can imagine him to be. But he came up and he said, I just have to convince you to stop doing this. This is just not the image that I want Mr. Rogers to have. And I said, sir, we're not playing with this image. In fact, we're glorifying this image. It's a very loving portrayal. And he stayed, he met Eddie, who played Mr. Rogers on our show. And I thought all would be fine. He never got quite comfortable with us continuing to do it, but he never had an uncomfortable word to say about it to anybody.
Yeah, it was. He seems like just an amazingly classy
He
guy.
was.
Who, yeah, and I have to say, it's one of those skits that you remember, all these years later, of just, you even see clips of it. It still makes you laugh a great deal. So Dick, you're amazingly vulnerable in this book, and humble in the way that you tell your story. You're always so self-effacing, which I think has been critical to your success. But while you've had all these amazing professional accomplishments, from founding Saturday Night Live to being the president and the head of NBC Sports, there's so much more in there that I didn't know. You started the show later with Bob Costas, Friday night videos, which were a huge success, late night talk shows, too many to mention, countless Olympic Games, yet you were fired 3 times along the way. You knew setbacks, but you handled each one with so much grace, with an understanding where you didn't hold grudges and you didn't burn bridges. In fact, in some cases, you came back to work with the same people who fired you. Can you tell us any lessons from that humility, that groundedness that has served you so well throughout your career?
Well, I think, first of all, life's too short to hold grudges. They're almost like a poison that you're injecting into your own body. So I always tried to avoid that. But in this particular case, somebody had given me the great advice along the way, which was life needs happy stories. Life needs good stories. And each one of those instances, I succeeded at every one of those jobs. I never failed at any of those jobs. I did not have perfect relationships with some of those men. I think in many cases they were jealous of my success, but I wasn't going to gain anything by attacking them in the book. In fact, somebody told me, well, I guess you're going to go after this guy or that guy. I said, no, why worry about why let that continue? In fact, it may be more fun that guy may be living now out in the Rocky Mountains or something. You go down to the bookstore, I'll buy the book, go looking through the book to see what I had to say about him. And it may be more shocking for him to find out I said nothing about him.
Exactly. So I think that's a great lesson, for everyone, all of our viewers, to handle the setbacks with grace, and to not hold on to that, as you said, that kind of insidious cancer of resentment that festers in a lot of people along the way. But on the flip side of all this, Dick, you also were offered many promotions along the way. You were enticed with new job opportunities and additional responsibilities to the work that you were doing. For example, at NBC Sports, to take on entertainment and news responsibilities along the way. You also had the grace to turn down many of these opportunities. Talk to us about what you learned about checking your own ambition and how critical that was to your success.
Well, I think the most important thing that you can do with your life as you're building a career is concentrate on relationships. And if you build good relationships with a solid base, I believe your life will be a success, whether it's the relationship with your spouse, whether it's the relationship with your coworkers. Mm-hmm. And I try to talk about that in the book in a way that people will see. It's not a mystery. It's just putting in the time to help other people when they need help, to look to help them when there's tragedy in their family, as people did with us. It's on you to build a life around you, and you can't build a life around you unless you build it through the relationships you make with friends and neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your life is certainly a testament to those relationships, the rich relationships that you have to this day. That many of us, many people, I think it's a sign of a great person when many people feel that they have a unique and special relationship with that person. And I count myself among the throngs that feels that, with you and Susie. But it seems that in your career, the Olympics have had a special allure over you. There's something about the global storytelling that has made you the champion, perhaps the singular champion of the modern Olympics over time. Your first Olympic experience was in Munich,
Yes.
and you were there for the terrible hostage situation, and then you were producing the Olympics at the Atlanta Games when the bomb went off in the Olympic Park, and again it had to be harrowing to kind of revisit the tragedy and the security that was involved in subsequent games after that. Any stories or any insights that you'd like to share about the Olympics? Why was this such a passion for you? And any stories that jump out from those experiences?
Well, in particular for me, the last Olympics that I produced were the Beijing Games about, I can't remember exactly, 7 or 8 years ago. And I had the good fortune, there were some complications, nothing major, but there were some complications between our world and the Chinese government. And President Bush, the younger President Bush,
Yeah.
I'd gone to Yale with, and he reached out to me and asked me if I would accept this letter that would be delivered to me for me to give to the president of China. And this was a time when people didn't know whether we were going to come to the Olympics. And he was resolute, young President Bush, that we, the United States, were going to come to those games. And no matter what other politicians said, we were going to do it. And they got me this letter, and I became the first person in about 2 or 3 years from the United States to have a direct relationship with the president of China, not because I was Dick Ebersol, but because I was representing the United States. And I delivered the letter, and that began a relationship through those games where I could talk directly to the leadership of China to facilitate things during those games, including some peaceful solutions to issues that rose during those games.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing legacy, Dick. And then closer to home, in 1990, you and Ken Shanzer, you pioneered a relationship, really a breakthrough relationship with Notre Dame and NBC Sports, a relationship that's endured now for more than 30 years of broadcasting on the NBC television network, all of the Notre Dame home football games. And this relationship, like everything you have done, was much deeper than a business relationship. You became a part of the Notre Dame family. You fell in love with the leaders, and the leaders fell in love with you. Can you talk a little bit about what that relationship has meant for both Notre Dame and NBC, and how about for you and your family personally?
Well, for starters, this took place at the time that Father Malloy, I believe, was the president of Notre Dame at the time. And he welcomed us with open arms. And we developed the same relationship with all of the various athletic directors who've been there since. And it became incredibly intimate. In my particular case, it became an eye-opener for me into the Catholic faith, so much so that on a trip on the Amazon with a bunch of Notre Dame alums and their wives, and Susie and I went along. You were on that trip. And it was on that trip one day, sitting with you and Father John, and I said that I really wanted to become a Catholic. And Father John was key in my early education in that direction. And then in that typical selfless way of his, he sent me then back to my parish priest, my local parish priest, who he had met at Teddy's funeral, to finish my conversion to the Catholic faith. So I have a multi-ties to the community there. And Susie and I still come to South Bend anywhere from 4 to 8 times a year.
Yeah, and the relationship endures. You focused on the relationships, and in this time where people are always looking for the highest bidder, and all of that, the partnership between NBC, due to those relationships and the enduring values that undermine them, has been really vital for us going forward. I see your success, Dick, in let me be brazen enough to try to kind of suggest that it comes down to four areas. And I'd love your opinion on this. One
Sure.
has been great storytelling. Always focus on the stories that are best told and bring those home, because that's what rings in people's hearts and that's what people remember. Two, focus on relationships, relationships, relationships. Three, your profound humility and your other-centeredness. You've brought that to every working relationship and every personal relationship. And four, it seems to me that everywhere you've gone, you have found great talent, and then you have let them spread their wings. You've allowed them to soar. Did I have that right? Or was there anything I'm missing? What would you say about that?
Yeah, the only thing I would pound home a little bit more was just how blessed I was that I met Susie, because she's the one who always kept me focused, reminding me of maybe I was going a little bit too far this way or too far that way. She was fearless in her approach to calming me down and setting me off in the right direction more than once.
So that marriage has been essential to keeping you in check, keeping you humble, grounded, focused, and all of that. And I'm sure that he would say the same about you.
Yeah, very much so. But again, you look at our kids, and they're all pretty unbelievable. Charlie best because he was at Notre Dame for quite some time and still has a regular relationship there. And he feels the same way about Notre Dame as his parents do. That is just an unbelievable place that the fathers set down in the middle of nowhere, and it grew into somewhere spectacular.
Yeah. So let me ask you a little bit about Teddy. I know
Sure.
that you guys were flying back after Thanksgiving from the Notre Dame USC game, and you fly back to Colorado to drop Susie off with a friend, and there, as you begin to take off again, the tragic accident occurs. You're on the plane together with Charlie, and then your youngest son, Teddy, who's 14 years old at the time. He tragically loses his life in the accident. You seem to break just about every bone in your body, and Teddy somehow comes out unscathed. I mean, it's just the full spectrum of that in terms of physical injury. I remember about a month later going to Teddy's funeral in that small Catholic church in the Litchfield area, and it's still one of the most memorable events in my life. It's etched on my soul. I remember you being rolled in, still in your hospital bed for the ceremony, surrounded by your family. I remember that there were Notre Dame priests on the altar. There were Notre Dame students that led the choir. Paul Simon got up to sing a special tribute song to Teddy. And then each and every one of the family members eulogized Teddy. But I'll never forget Susan's plaintive cry to keep her family together as she addressed each and every one of you, and why you shouldn't beat yourself up over this moment. But holding her family together was one of the most memorable talks that I will ever be exposed to in my life. You guys as a family have really worked to kind of keep Teddy's legacy alive. Tell us a little bit why that's so important to you and the family.
Well, I'm a big believer, as is Susie, and as are some of our kids, that by talking about Teddy, telling stories about Teddy, he was quite a character. His legacy is maintained, particularly among our grandchildren. It's as if Teddy continues to live through them, because I can hear them as their younger brothers or sisters grew up. They tell them about Uncle Teddy, who they have never met, and the ones they're telling the stories to will never meet.
Yeah.
But he's a presence in their lives, and it makes me smile every time I hear it. And I recommend to families that lose a child, keep that child alive by telling stories, talking about them in family gatherings. Don't suppress it. Let it come up. Let it come up. Let it fill the room. It
And
works for us.
You love to take walks. I know, whether you're traveling or you're back home in Litchfield. Tell us about how you like to still continue the conversation with Teddy.
Well, it's about a 4-mile walk, and I head out from our house and walk down the streets of this incredibly well-preserved by people over hundreds of years, not by some grant from the government. And they're homes where people who fought in the Revolutionary War lived, where George Washington slept, all of that. And but I ultimately get to Teddy's grave, and there's a friend who passed away sometime just before Teddy died. I lean against his big tombstone and have a conversation with Teddy, and sometimes with him. Not that I believe that they're physically going to appear to me, but just because sharing with their spirits makes me feel good. And I recommend to people doing the same thing. It is so important to keep that spirit alive of those family members.
Yeah. Well, you guys have been absolutely courageous as a family. Some people at that level of tragedy, losing a child, shrink and lose the will to go on, or their families become divided and separate due to the suffering. But you guys seem to have come together stronger than ever and more courageous than ever to do good in this world.
Well, they're not fortunate enough to have Susan St. James in their family, because she wouldn't allow that.
Yeah, exactly. So any parting words of wisdom, any reflections, any stories that come from the book that we didn't share today that you would like to highlight?
Oh, well, Susie's reminding me from off camera. A story that I most often love to tell, is my favorite memory of my entire career, is convincing the Atlanta organizing committee to let me invite Muhammad Ali to light the cauldron at the start of the Atlanta Olympics. And the spectacle of that, of watching Ali still trembling from his infirmities, but even as the flames were licking back over his hand, well, you can see it in this video, he's still going forward trying to light the cauldron. And as you'll see, then that flame will fly up and light the big cauldron at the other end of the stadium. And nothing still moves me in my entire career like that does.
And that was a really courageous decision. I know that you had to use every power of persuasion to get them to accept Ali in the South to be the person to light that flame. It was a huge surprise. People, even the announcers, right? They didn't even know that.
I didn't tell Dick Ebersol. I had too much faith in them. They were the best announcers of their time. That their surprise at seeing the spectacle would carry the day, and indeed it did. And I still get sort of goosebumps looking at it today.
And Dick, it changed Muhammad Ali's life too at that point, right? He had not been making public appearances, right?
Not much. And so many people had picked up on this thing that a few Southerners, or that's probably not fair, but this idea that he was a draft dodger. He wasn't a draft dodger. He was willing to sacrifice everything. He sacrificed the prime earning years of his career, something 99% of the country would never do. He did it by always including children and everything that he did. He was a truly remarkable man. And it's great today. I run into President Clinton every once in a while, and he still recalls that night as the greatest hush in American history, because when Ali first came up over the edge of the stadium with that flame, the stadium just went, and you could hear it. It was, I mean, it's hard to believe a hush makes noise, but it did. It's like all the air was sucked out of that stadium. It was incredible. And I still feel that. And across from my desk in Litchfield, my home desk, is a life-size, almost life-size blow-up of Ali lighting that cauldron.
Well, you've led this amazing life. You've, behind the scenes, in a self-effacing manner, have created so many moments that are absolutely unforgettable. As I found myself, reading the book, Dick, I would go onto YouTube and I'd pull up that excerpt from with Dick Enberg and Bob Costas sharing their surprise, or I would go back to the Munich games to see the Jim McKay's coverage. Especially the final moment when the hostages had been killed and he had to bring that to the forefront. So many stories where you were directing, orchestrating everything behind the scenes, moments that are huge, not just in the lives of so many in this nation, but across the globe, you've been behind. And to have you as an honorary degree recipient, as a Notre Dame parent, to be such a leader together with Susan and this Notre Dame family is something that gives us enormous gratitude and pride.
Well, thank you, Lou, very much. I want to point out that there were many of those great moments from that Olympics were produced by people other than Dick Ebersol. I had the good fortune to be there and be involved in some of them, but I don't want the world to think that I did all that just myself. I didn't.
Yeah, that's a great way to end this, because it speaks to who you are and the kind and generous soul that makes you so special. I just want to say that we're thrilled that you and Susan will be coming back to campus in a couple of weeks for the UNLV game. So on October 22nd, game day, and Saturday at the Notre Dame bookstore, if any of you are coming back or here on campus, from 11:30 a.m. until 1 p.m., Dick will be there to sign his book in the bookstore on October 21st. Again, before the Notre Dame game from Saturday night to Sunday night. I assure you, it's a terrific read. It's like balm to your soul. It's filled with goodness and kindness and amazing stories. It's actually quite a page turner for a memoir. So thank you, Dick. Thanks for making the time to be here with us today. This, as always, will be posted on the ND Loyal YouTube page. So people who weren't able to catch it live will be able to go back and pick up this interview. And we're grateful again to you and Susie that you're such leaders of this Notre Dame family.
Well, thank you, Lou, very much. Look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks. Okay,
great. As we always do, please join us from wherever you are, your workplaces, your homes, to join us as we always do in closing with a prayer to Our Lady, the patroness of Notre Dame. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Take care. God bless. Thank you again, Dick. Thank you to your family. And let me thank Carbon for tuning in to watch Dick.
Take care.